In this video, I'm going to tell you how to answer any interview question really confidently. If you've ever gone to an interview and you receive feedback that you didn't provide enough detail, this is going to be especially valuable for you. Or if you've been told you've provided too much detail, this will help you get really structured. In summary, it's beneficial for everybody. So, the type of question this works best for is those tell me a time type questions. So a classic example of this is tell me a time you dealt with a difficult customer. Now what a lot of people do is they go straight into the detail. So they go into, well, when I was working in hospitality, there was this customer who was unhappy with their meal, and I listened to them, and then I got them a new meal, and then they were happy. Okay, so the problem with this example is it's kind of narrow. And unless you're applying for a hospitality position in a similar sort of restaurant, it may not reflect the job that you're actually applying for, and the type of things that are actually needed in that particular role. So whenever I hear a question like tell me a time, the first thing I always do is try to figure out why they're actually asking that question. Because if, for example, that tell me a time you dealt with a difficult customer, that question isn't necessarily about difficult customers. It's more about customer service, and the way they assess customer service is in a difficult scenario, because that's the hardest end, I guess, of customer service. Unless you're dealing with negative customers all the time, and there's very few roles that actually do that, the question is more about good customer service, and good customer service occurs when you're dealing with everyday customers, but it's especially important when you're dealing with the complexities of a difficult customer. So the way I'd answer this question is, tell me a time you dealt with a difficult customer. What I would say is, customer service is really important for me. I pride myself on the level of commitment I provide to customers, and I actively listen to what customers want so I can provide a service that enables me to meet their needs. Now, I recognize that there are times when there might be customers that have different expectations than what we can provide. Let me give you an example of a time I dealt with a more challenging customer. I don't like to call them difficult customers, because I believe my approach actually works to actually help facilitate great solutions. There's no difficult customer, it's just a customer with a different opinion. So we'll just pause it there. So you notice that the first thing that I did with tell me your time is I actually took ownership of the question, and I provided a bit of a summary of my experience in customer service. Another way you can answer this is customer focus is really important to me. I've had 15 years in managing customers in a wide range of industries, from hospitality, from banking, retail, and across all those different industries, I pride myself on my commitment to deliver excellent results to customers. And I do that in a few ways. And I'll explain that in a second. So the reason we do this kind of like introduction to the question as such is, in the first example where I just went into a really narrow example, that's what the majority of people do. And what happens is when you go straight into a narrow example, like I worked in hospitality, I did this, you're just narrowing. Now compare that to someone like myself that's, in my example, I've said that I've worked in lots of different customer service industries. I've said that what my customer service approach is. I put a positive lens on it. So immediately I'm adding more value than someone else that's just getting specifically into the example. So, because when you're thinking about someone actually assessing an interview, what they're looking for is the person that can add the most value specifically to the role. And the person that can add the most value is the person that probably knows more about customer service, that shows that they've got a direct customer service or a customer service philosophy or approach, or has experience in customer service across a lot of areas. So it wasn't a long introduction, but we've just taken a bit of ownership before we've gone into the example. Okay, so the next thing, there's lots of different models for answering interview questions. They tend to follow a similar formula. They just call, slightly different letters to make them sound like they're really different. And I'll do the same thing because everyone else is. So the first part of the answering the question is the situation, also known as task in some examples. So that's basically what's actually happening. So a situation might be, I was working in a really busy restaurant. It was a Friday night, and someone had booked a table for 4 people, and they had shown up with 8 people. Now, any other night of the week, this wouldn't have been an issue. We would have just put a few extra tables together. But unfortunately, we had a lot of events on this night, and it didn't look like we could actually accommodate these people. And it was also early in the night, so there wasn't likely to be people leaving soon. So I actually offered this person several options. I said that we can accommodate 4 people now. Perhaps 4 people would like to sit at the bar, and when whenever table becomes available, I can join them together. The person wasn't happy with that. They had said that it's never been a problem before. They've always been able to get space, and I explained to them, well, it is actually early on in the night. It is quite busy. Even offered to pay for one of their drinks, just out of generosity of my heart, and they were kind of sort of were like, yeah, that you could do that, but I want a table. And so I was talking to them and trying to come up with a few responses. I did have an idea, and I thought, well, there was a few tables empty, and because it was 6 o'clock and there were people due to come at 6:30. So I thought what I could do, because this was a VIP client, there is someone that had visited the restaurant a lot, and they were someone whose business we were really keen to keep. So they were very angry, but they were kind of civil at the same point. What I did was I looked through our booking system, and then I saw that there were some people coming at 6:30, and I knew these people. I knew them as sort of friendly clients. So I rang them up and said, look, I've got some people here who brought a few extra people. It's a really significant night for them, because this is also what the person had told me. Would you be open to coming maybe 30 minutes or even a little bit later? And these people, and I said, look, what I'll do is I'll get you a drink. I'll buy you a drink. They said, no, look, you don't need to do that. We can come at 7:30. It's all good. So I spoke to the people who'd booked the table, and I said, look, I've spoken to someone. I've made it work. And they were really, really satisfied with that response. So as you can see from this example, I really listened to what the client was after. I used a problem-solving approach to come up with it. That client, I actually found out later, left a review on one of the review sites saying how good it was that we were so flexible. So that obviously created some additional business for the restaurant. And so that sort of customer service approach, I think, would be really valuable in this position that you have available, just as an example of some of the stuff I've been able to do. All right. So there's my example. I don't eat out at restaurants, so I apologize if you're in the restaurant industry and we'd be like, well, we wouldn't do that. That would never happen. I'm sorry. I was just making it up on the spot. But if you want to invite me to your restaurant, I'll go in, I'll play the role of a difficult customer, and we can get a more realistic scenario. It seems to be a trend in my videos that I talk about food or food-related stuff. Anyway, so you can see from that model, what we did was we sort of started with a bit of my customer service approach, and then we went into a bit of the situation, and I got really excited. I just kept going. So we went to the actions. So actions are things that I specifically did. And then we went into the impacts. So what was the actual outcome? One of the real risks, one of the things that people consistently, because I did a lot of mock interviews as an interview coach, consistently the things that people would miss are the outcomes. So they talk about the situation, they talk about all the actions, sort of like what I did, and then they left you kind of hanging on the outcomes. All the outcomes were pretty weak, and I managed to find a spot for the people. And they just kind of ended there. And then I'm kind of like, well, what actually happened? What was the impact? Well, the impact was that person left a really positive review. The restaurant had a really good reputation. The people that I'd spoken to were happy enough to change their booking, and they were happy with that free drink that I got them. There's lots of different impacts that actually happen, but people don't talk about impacts. Because in some models where it's sort of like situation, action, outcome, or STAR model, situation, task, action, response, people often say the result, it's kind of almost a throwaway, and their client was happy. They left unhappy, but, I made them happier, or at least they understood our processes or whatever. the impact is the most important part of any interview answer, because if it didn't create an impact, like you're just doing actions for the sake of it. If I did all those things and then it actually made no difference, the person was still angry and they left in a huff and a puff, well then what's the point of all those sorts of things? What's my message that I'm telling a future employer? So you almost need to work backwards with any examples that you choose about which one had the really good impacts, which one had good impacts for the customers, the business, your team, your manager, your work area. People who forget to do impacts, what I tell them is choose an example, choose several examples, and be really clear about, for those examples, what was the impact? What was the impact for the customer? The impact for the customer in this specific example that I said was that they got the table that they wanted. So they looked good in front of their friends, they were happy enough with our business and their repeat client. The impact for the business was that the people left a good review, which means there were even more customers coming in, hopefully not on a Friday at 6. And the impact for my manager was they didn't get a complaint about me of being difficult or rude or not considerate or caring. And the actions that I took, wouldn't have taken a long time. It would have been still time taken, but it wouldn't have taken a long time. It would have taken longer to talk to people, to get all their information it might have been the most effective strategy at that time. So when your examples, always think about who the specific impact would be. If you are someone that you're really good at that, talking about the actions you took because you're very task orientated and you're not really great at doing the actions or the impacts, what I've suggested for other clients in the past is to start with those things, which is kind of a little bit weird, but for some people it works really well. So in this example, I could sort of say, look, so tell me a time you dealt with a difficult customer. Yep, I do my preamble, customer service, really important for me, blah, blah, blah. Then if I get into it and I say, look, I actually received a really positive review on an online review about the how I'd assisted customers to find a table on a really busy night. And my manager was really, really chuffed to hear this review. And this is how I did that. So let me tell you the story. So firstly, what happened was people came in, and then I'd do the situation part, and then I'd do the action, and I'd remind people what the result was. So as I said earlier, these people left a really great review. So it could have been a really difficult night for them and for the business, but due to a bit of problem solving and my customer service approach, ended up being really great for all parties. So that's another trick you can use as well. Start with the action, start with the impact, because that's the strongest piece. So if that works for you, start with it. Most people like the situation, action, outcome approach because it kind of builds on the story a little bit and it's sort of like almost sequential. Whereas sometimes if that doesn't work for you, you mix it up. So I hope this has been helpful. Use some of this, use all of it. Whatever works for you. The thing that I've learned over time with people answering interview questions is that people tend to answer in a very similar pattern in terms of how much detail they provide or how much the type of examples they provide. And if I do a mock interview, I know within one question how someone's usually going to answer the rest of them because people have a pattern. So I'd really recommend, if you don't really know your pattern, is to record yourself answering a question and just watch it back. It's awkward as hell. I know because I've had to edit all these videos myself, but you start hearing your pattern of how you answer stuff and then get feedback from other people. How do they think you answered all the questions? And once you understand your pattern, you can go, that's my natural strength, how can I add on it? If I change the way the story was structured this way, how might that impact it? So over time, like any skill, you'll develop it, you'll grow it, you'll get it in a way that it really works for you. Thank you so much. Best of luck with your next interview. I'm sure you do really, really well. If this was helpful for you, like and subscribe. Thank you very much. See you later. Bye-bye now.